Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year to you in the year of 2025. As always, we're here with the Garden Hour. We're reliable and always want to be here to help answer your questions. My name is Debi Kelly, and I am a field specialist in horticulture based in Boone County. I'm also the State Extension Master Gardener Coordinator. So if you're interested in the Master Gardener program, feel free to reach out to me. We have an exciting new January, lots of ideas that spin through our heads as we're sitting here looking at the snow and the cold and the ice, and all those gardening catalogs are appearing, and we're trying to decide what to grow. So, this is an exciting time of the year. Everybody thinks gardening just happens when it's warm and growing, but gardening actually happens year round. And we have some presentations that will actually show that, as well as those gardening catalogs and all those enticing, beautiful pictures. And then we get up and we try to grow them. And I don't know about you, but mine don't always look as pretty as those. So, what I'd like to do is to let you know that Jennifer has changed her name to ask questions here. So, if you've got a question, click on her name in the chat box and she will ask that question after the presentation if it's about that. If it's about a different topic, then go ahead and ask that and we will try to answer it if we have time. If not, we will get back in touch with you. So make sure you put down your email address, or Jennifer may just reply back to you and say, hey, we don't have time. Can I have your email address? And then someone will definitely get back in touch with you to try to give you an answer. We have Donna, who is working in dropping all the great information into the chat box. Jennifer, I already mentioned, she's also presenting. We have Traven, and she's going to do a great presentation, and so is Kelly McGowan. And as always, we want to thank to Jared. He's behind the scenes. He makes sure that each time we do a garden hour that it goes uninhibited, and we greatly appreciate that. What I'd like to do now, real quick, is go ahead and welcome Zack. Zack is our famous weather guy, as we call him here with MU Extension, and we're always happy to have Zack to give us an update and tell us kind of what the next couple of weeks might look like and how soon we might be able to actually go outside and maybe even start looking at some of the things in our lawn and garden. Zack, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. And spoiler alert for today. I do think our cold's going to stick around here, but we might have a brief warm up this week. But for those of you who were joining us on the Garden Hour, our last one in December, once we get into this monthly schedule outside of the growing season, it's always interesting how much things can change in just 1 month. And so I'll actually start today by looking back, because we can officially, from a climate perspective, put 2024 in the record books here. And it ended up being a warm year. And in fact, December was actually quite mild. And so December 2024 started off about 5 degrees warmer than average. And so our first official month of winter was actually pretty mild. But this figure here, this bar graph, shows just our monthly temperature anomalies, or how different the temperatures were from average over that year of 2024, where you see the red bars, we had warm months, and the blue bars, we had the cooler months. And overall, we had many more of those warmer months. And in fact, 2024 was actually Missouri's second warmest year on record. So our average yearly temperature was about 3.5 degrees above average. And we have those records going back to 1895. So a pretty remarkable year here in 2024. When we look at the precipitation, December wasn't very exceptional. Precipitation was really close to average statewide. So we see here we were about 4/10 of an inch above average for a statewide average precip of about 3 inches in December. And a lot of that was coming in non-frozen liquid precipitation if we look back to December and the holidays there. But again, if we look at our whole year in review for 2024, it's actually going to go down as a wet year. And it was a kind of a roller coaster here. If you look at the bar graph, we had some warm months in February and March, and then getting into the fall, But overall, accumulating all the precipitation, it ended up being a wet year with about 3.5 inches above average. And so, sitting here today and looking at the most recent United States drought monitor, we do still have some abnormally dry and even moderate drought conditions out there, but continuing to improve. And with these wetter conditions and more active pattern over the winter, hopefully we continue to erase any of the remaining drought from this fall before we get into the next growing season. But enough about the kind of warm and wet weather we saw in December, because as soon as the calendar flipped into the new year, we really changed that weather pattern as well into a much colder pattern for Missouri. And so quite a difference so far in our month-to-date temperatures for January. So December, we were about 5 degrees above average. Right now in January, we're already running about 5 to 6 degrees below average. So cooler temperatures than average during the time of the year when we usually see our coldest temperatures. And as a result, we've gotten a pretty sustained period of days with uncomfortable cold. Precipitation's been pretty close to average, but on the right here, this is not a rainfall map. This is actually an accumulated snowfall map for January 1st to January 14th. And it's really been remarkable how much snow, ice, and freezing rain and sleet mixing in there too. But overall, getting this winter snowpack across a lot of the state. And so anywhere on this map where you see those blue colors, greater than 5 inches of snow so far from those 2 winter storms here in January, but you can really see kind of the highest corridor or where the heaviest totals were pretty close to following the Missouri River, but really just north of St. Louis and Kansas City metros where some of those highest totals were from the snow events. And if we look at some of our big winners so far, this table is just showing some of the highest snowfall totals we have so far across the state this month. And you can see quite a bit of variability, but most of these counties are, again, either northeast of Kansas City or just northwest of St. Louis. And our big winner here, if you like snow, is St. Charles, Missouri. They're sitting at 14.5 inches through the first half of January so far. Along with that snow, we've also had some nights with very cold overnight low temperatures, a lot of that due to snowpack sitting on the ground. So here's just a list of some of these coldest temperatures we've seen throughout January. So we see St. Joe's is the coldest so far. They got down to -12 on January 7th. But again, a lot of these areas are pretty close to the areas where we saw some of those highest snowfall totals. So snowpack helping to usher in some of those really cold temperatures at nighttime as well. And so with this January snowfall, on the left here, this plot shows where we're at compared to normal as far as our percent of normal snowfall. And so from the beginning of the season to now, and we can see all these greens and blues, we are above average for snowfall throughout the year, and very well above average if you get down into warmer areas such as the Boot Heel, where we typically don't see this much snow. But there is one county pretty much along the Iowa border, Maryville, Kirksville, that's gotten some of the snow but missed out on some of the heavier totals and actually has some below average snowfall. And interestingly enough, some of Missouri is much snowier than Iowa to this point this winter. And on the right, this is our current snowpack that's still left across the state, valid across this morning, and it is very, very slow to melt. During that first winter storm, a lot of us got some sleet and freezing rain mixed in with the snow. When we get ice and sleet, that can typically hold a lot more liquid water, which means it takes a lot longer for that snowpack to melt and evaporate. And so as a result, still a remarkable amount of the state, nearly all the state has some amount of snow on the ground, where you have these light blues here. That's anywhere from 2 to 4 inches. And then we see kind of along the Missouri River and into northwest Missouri, still 4 to 10 inches of snowpack on the ground that we're waiting on to melt. Now, the good news is I think we're going to melt most of the snow by Friday of this week. And so we started this week pretty cold, but we're going to continue to increase our temperatures through Friday here. And so These maps show our forecast high for this afternoon on the left and our lows, hoping to hit freezing here in Columbia. But look at some of this warmth down in southwest Missouri that's going to be moving north here, getting up into the mid 40s in Branson, 41 in Springfield. But look at these lows tonight as well. Most of us have seen single digit lows the past 3 nights. 25 degrees is still pretty cold, but it's going to feel a lot warmer than it's been the past few nights. And then we go into Thursday, temperatures get a little bit warmer. I think the entire state will be above freezing with some sunshine as well. So a good snowmelt day. And then a chance, at least for the southern half of the state, to get into the 50s by Friday. And so these temperatures will feel great compared to January so far. Now, what's causing these temperatures to warm up? We're going to see this warming ahead of our next system, and it is a rainmaker. Yes, that means no snow or ice with this one. This will be liquid precipitation and a pretty light event. And so this map shows the rain we can expect on the 24-hour period from 7 a.m. Friday to 7 a.m. Saturday. Not much. Pretty much southeast Missouri is really where we're going to see the most rainfall, up to a 1/4 inch in Cape Girardeau. The rest of the state where you see this light green, really just some light showers, maybe up to 1/10 of an inch of rainfall. So don't expect a lot of precipitation from this event on Friday. If you do get some, it'll be rain. We'll have some clouds, but more importantly, behind this system, a cold front's going to kick in another round of really bitter cold air beginning this weekend. And so on the left is our outlooks we look at from the Climate Prediction Center. You can barely see our state outline here because for next week, they're predicting anywhere from an 80 to 100% chance of below average temperatures. And so a lot of confidence in this cold air next week. What does that look like for Missouri? On the right are our high temperatures forecast for Sunday, pretty much in the teens for most of the state. And you see those blue shadings behind here just shows the kind of scope of that cold air that's really going to take over by late next week, the whole eastern half of the US. And so on top of that, the good news is that it looks dry. We might have some flurries next week, but no snow that's coming in along with this cold air that would cause any kind of winter weather problems with this cold like we saw earlier in January. But the big story, these are the high temperatures getting into next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and it looks like the cold will stick around until late week as well. The teens for most of the state, if you get into southeastern Missouri and the boot heel, maybe getting into the mid 20s, but very cold during this time. Here's the overnight lows. So we're talking single digits in the southern half of the state, but back to negative temperatures in the forecast for those overnight lows. And if we combine the winds with those overnight lows, I think we could have a few mornings with some of those dangerous wind chills. So -15 to -20, especially in the northern half of the state, could be something to watch with that cold air in the forecast. So cold looks to be the main story. Looking ahead into some longer range outlooks, and I'll just show temperature here. Not as confident as next week, but looking into the last week of January and the first week of February, our probabilities are still for those below average temperatures. So as of right now, it looks like another couple weeks of cold, and beyond that, we might be looking at a real winter here in Missouri if this sticks around in February as well. But otherwise, that's all I've got for today, and everyone stay warm.
Thank you a lot, Zach. We always enjoy having you here, especially when we can see when we kind of deviate from the norm and what's happening along in that line. So those pieces I know for me in particular, I greatly appreciate. So thank you so much for being with us. And as many of us know, we have had snow, sleet, ice, freezing rain, all those other types of wonderful mixtures. And when that happens, we can have a lot of damage to our trees. And so I asked Dr. Hank Stelzer if he could join us. He couldn't, but he did record this for us. So let's hear what he has to say about first aid for storm damaged trees.
I'm Hank Stelzer, and I'm here to talk a little bit about first aid for storm damaged trees. You know, a little ice on our trees after a storm can look quite beautiful, but a lot can really harm the trees and put them at risk. So after the storm has passed, though, you want to be patient. You want to stay calm. Doing right things right can be the difference between giving trees a good chance of survival and losing them unnecessarily. If there is no immediate physical risk from a damaged tree to either you or property, and you're unsure about the tree's condition, just keep it for now. Second point to remember is to be safe. First aid for trees almost always involves chainsaws. Pruning limbs from storm damaged trees is not the same thing as cutting firewood. Twisted branches, trees are under tremendous strain. And a quick release of that stored energy can result in unpredictable and oftentimes dangerous results. You want to look up, you want to look down, look all around, identify potential hazards before making that first cut. Second point to remember is don't be a victim of a scam. Do not be pressured by someone showing up with a chainsaw offering you to repair your trees. Oftentimes in these large-scale events, local resources are just overwhelmed, and a lot of fly-by-night individuals and companies will swoop in for that quick buck. You want to check and see if they're part of an established business. Ask for a certificate of insurance. They are liable for any damage that might be caused as a result of their actions. Ideally, someone on the ground, not in the office, should be a professional arborist, either recognized by the International Society of Arboriculture, the National Association of Arborists, or carry the American Society for Consulting Arborists. After those two things are covered, you want to begin assessing the damage. So other than the storm damage, is that tree basically healthy? Are major limbs broken? Have the main upward spreading branches been lost? Is at least 50% of the tree's crown branches, are they still intact? Are there enough remaining branches to form a new branch structure? And ask yourself, is the tree a desirable species for its location? Or in some cases, is the species at risk? For example, ash trees. If you've been battling emerald ash borer, maybe it's time to think about replacing that tree and getting one that is not known to be susceptible to an insect or disease. Also, too, that tree maybe was planted too close to the house, blocking a view, compromising a foundation. So this is another reason to maybe consider getting another tree and maybe moving it to a proper location. So there's kind of three buckets we can look at. If we want to say keep it, those trees that can be kept. Okay. If damage is slight, you can prune back broken branches or repair torn bark, and I'll show you that in a minute. A mature tree can usually survive loss of one major limb, and it's simply pruning that limb back to the trunk. Young trees can sustain quite a bit of damage as long as the leader is intact. The wait and see, the 50-50 ball, you want to resist the temptation to simply cut it down and be rid of the problem. Time is on your side. You want to remove only the damaged branches. And then after careful pruning of those broken branches, give the tree time to recover. You don't want to prune too heavily because a tree is going to need all that, as much foliage as it can produce in the coming years to aid in its recovery. And for the large trees, you want to consult a professional arborist. Again, you do not want to be climbing around on a ladder with a chainsaw. Those larger trees, the arborists, they'll have lifts, buckets where they can get up and really look closely at the damage and do the necessary pruning. Replace it. Some trees simply can't be saved. It could be, like I say, the wrong tree, maybe the Bradford pear or that silver maple. It's time for that tree to maybe go. Wrong tree. Those are usually planted in early neighborhoods to provide more shade rapidly, but over the long haul, their life expectancies are relatively short. And again, as I said before, maybe the tree's in the wrong place. It's time to maybe move that tree, that new tree, and put it in its proper location. Now, the tree could already be weakened by insect or disease, so this could be the final nail in the coffin. You maybe just can't resurrect a Lazarus tree. Sometimes, even though there's not, there's not enough damage you see, but the tree has had enough stress on it that there's actually vertical cracks that will appear in the trunk, and those are fatal flaws to the tree in the long run. If more than 50% of the crown is gone, again, that food factory is needed to help the tree in recovery. But there are some basic first aids that you can provide. Again, resist the urge to prune too much. Remove those broken branches that are still attached to the tree. Prune the small branches at the point where they join the larger ones. The same principles we'd use if we were doing a normal prune on a healthy tree. Cut large branches back to the main limb, or in the case of a main branch, might be all the way to the trunk. Seen this picture before, I'm sure. This is a proper sequence of making the cuts to remove that damaged branch. The first cut should be an undercut about a third of the way through the diameter of the branch. The second cut further out from that first, away from the tree, away from that main branch, make a downward cut. And this sequence here, what this does is it prevents that branch, if it breaks off prematurely, from then ripping and tearing the bark and then damaging the healthy tissue downstream. And then the final cut is outside from that enlarged donut, as we call it, the branch collar. And that is you want to stay out from that because that's the natural abscission zone, and the tree will heal naturally. The other thing you want to do once that cut is made, do not apply any pruning paint or sprays or anything. Let the tree heal naturally. In the case of a torn branch, you can use, depending upon how thick the bark is, you could use a utility knife, or if it's thicker, like a wood chisel, and you simply remove the rough edges. And again, that'll give more opportunity for that tree to naturally start healing over that wound. And of course, don't top your trees. It might look good next year when it all bushes out, but those are points of weak branch attachment, and eventually they'll fail in the next windstorm or ice storm. So it's just not a good idea at all. More importantly, here, take a look at this. This was the 2006 ice storm we had in southwest Missouri. I was in the town of Buffalo walking down this one street. Notice here, those two trees in the foreground, those trees were topped, and you can see where they were. Meanwhile, those two trees further back, those trees were not topped. And while they did sustain some minor damage, they survived quite well. Well, that's all I have. I hope this helps. And as always, MIZ. I'm Hank Stelzer, and I'm here to talk a little bit.
So we just want to say thanks to Hank. Sorry he couldn't join us live, but he did a nice job there talking about how to take care of your trees. And then I dropped into the chat box where you can find a certified arborist near you. And my mom has to take down a tree, and she didn't want to do it, but I've kind of talked her into it. So hopefully next time I go visit her in St. Louis, her tree will be gone. I'm sure she'll call me when they appear. But oh well. Things happen, trees live, trees do pass, unfortunately. So keeping with the theme of winter and caring for our plants, Traven's going to do a presentation on winter salt injury to our plants. And we may not necessarily always think about it in that respect, but we do have to think about our plants and how we lay down salt. So Traven, let's hear what you have to say. Right now, you are not in presentation mode. Yes, thank you. And we're seeing your
Yeah.
next upcoming slide as well.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can get the other one.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Let me reshare, see if I'll press the other one.
Okay.
All right.
Looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Traven Crocker. I'm the horticulture field specialist for Butler County. So if you had a weekend like mine, it involved shoveling some snow and applying some de-icer. So I definitely want to stress the main point. We need to ensure our safe travel, keep those walkways clean, roads ice-free as possible. I know we are talking a little bit about how to protect our plants, but we can replace the plants. We can't replace you. So if you need to, if you're worried about your plants, take your safety in concern first. So several different methods, shovel, snow blowers, plows, but the one I'm going to focus on now is one of the most common that we use are de-icers. So looking into when does that injury actually occur? This is really our late winter, early spring applications. This is going to be causing the most damage. Early winter, we're probably going to have a couple more snow showers and ice events. So really applying right now is not going to be the issue. Usually early spring, these plants are going to start waking up and taking up all that water. So that's really when those salts are going to become an issue, is later on. So little disclaimer, I'm not endorsing any specific products. That really, this is just to show you a couple brands and a couple things that you may have been applying over the week. So most of our icers come in a liquid or a granular form. And most common you're going to have is sodium chloride, or NaCl, or we call it rock salt, table salt. Main advantage, this stuff is really effective and very, very low cost and readily available. The main disadvantage is all the corrosive properties of these salts. Looking at the the damage to your vehicles, I know kind of northern Missouri, you do have that corrosion on your vehicles and the undercarriage that can actually cause quite a bit of issue. And it can also cause concrete damage. And looking at just regular NaCl, that blend, it's really only effective. It comes to a temperature point where it becomes ineffective. So some of our other products may be a quick ice melt. I know the other one has a Roadrunner on it. So those actually come in with different blends of products. So I know the table is a little wordy, please forgive it. But we're going to look at all of your sodium chloride, calcium chloride, all your chlorides are going to be having that. Those compounds are going to have that corrosive tendencies and leach and maybe, some handling. Talking about leaching and having residues like that white chalky residue that I'm mopping up after my kids when they come into the house. So, so cleanup, it can be easy. Spreading, excuse me. So handling and storage is fairly simple, just kind of keeping it clean and dry. So the ease of use of these salts are really why these products are more prominent than some of our other alternatives. Now, looking down at potassium acetate, this is an alternative, so it's effective to -25 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is also biodegradable and safe for plants and soils, and we don't have that corrosion factor that we have with all of our other chlorides. The disadvantage, it's extremely expensive. Liquid, usually it only comes in a liquid form, and is it readily available? You're not going to be able to go down to your local hardware store and pick it up. So urea and nitrogen, also kind of want to point out, these are commonly used as our fertilizers. So Some of these compounds do tend to have some corrosion issues or corrosive properties, or a high ammonia content, nitrogen runoff. That can be a problem, especially with our waterways, with leaching. And again, they are going to be more expensive than the alternative. Continuing, we have a couple other products, calcium, magnesium acetate. Again, with these, we have different levels of effectiveness, different advantages and disadvantages. I also want to kind of draw your attention to some of our agricultural byproducts. We usually use this as a mix or a blend with our other chlorides. So this helps reduce that corrosiveness when we have that blend. So it's a little easier on the plants and the soil. Most of them are biodegradable, especially if we mix them maybe with a urea or some type of other alternative fertilizer. And again, disadvantage, expense is always a main factor. Sometimes they may only come in a liquid form, a specific form. And then last, we do have abrasive materials, sand or kitty litter. Advantages, again, low cost, but sometimes they're more for that traction factor instead of actually melting that ice. So most of all of these salts work on they work due to their freezing point of depression. And even our calcium chloride, that actually gives off a little heat when mixed with our water. So we have that nice melting effect. All right, I know this is more for high tunnel production, but I did want to throw it in there because we may actually, because it does relate to our damage. So on the soil side, excess sodium, excess salt actually can alter our soil structure. We can have reduced infiltration, reduced soil aeration, and all of these factors may actually lead to compaction and then eventually erosion and then water runoff. So this is a figure 3 is a photo of a high tunnel that has excess salt accumulation from fertilizers, which we've and figure 4 is just looking at the soluble salt damage to these peppers in a high tunnel. So kind of giving you an idea where else you may see this salt damage, not just on your landscape plants, that in the high tunnel that is a problem as well. On the plant side, looking at with these excess salts, it's really going to interfere with the process of photosynthesis. When those plants start taking up that water, they're going to fight with those osmotic potentials and those water potentials and fight with those getting that water. It can also interfere with respiration and transpiration within the plant. So on our chloride ions, these can actually interfere with, injure our tissues. So they can also, just like our salts, disrupt that water intake and can cause nutritional imbalances of our magnesium and our potassium. So looking at diagnosing and testing, usually we're going to be doing this as a foliar analysis or a soil salt test early spring. We want to catch it before those spring rains because that rain is just going to leach all those salts away. So the timing on that may be troublesome, beating the rain. Leaf and stem tissue. You want to look at the growing season for the chloride content. All right, so a couple indications of the salt spray injury. Usually we have this spray when we're going down the highway and the road is kicking up, the tire tracks are kicking up all that, and it's kind of going on the sides of our tree. So the injury is going to be on the more or closer to the side of the application. Downwind, those areas are going to be a little bit more affected. Can occur as far as 60 feet. And we want to look also about our sensitive plants. Some of our sensitive species can be affected 1,000 feet away from the area of application. And sometimes in the next slide, I have a photo that really shows you we may have you'll see the damage of where the snow covered it, or there was a barrier, and then the top half, and then the top is or the bottom is unaffected and the top is affected. So different species are going to have different tolerances. So that's kind of on the salt spray injury side. On the soil, usually we're going to have more localized 30 feet of that application, and we're going to see more injury in those areas that water pools or the water runoff from, from the highway. So that's, if we have any plants planted there, that's where we're going to start seeing those damages. All right, so a couple of photos for our evergreens and kind of the symptoms that we're going to be seeing. So early spring, we're going to see like delayed bud break, stunted vigor and growth. We may have reduced flowering, or we can also have dieback. And then we have that new growth coming up right behind it. And it's going to cause this witch's broom type growth here in the bottom photo. And with our deciduous trees, we're going to see a wilting. When we get that dry, hot weather in the springtime, late summer, we're going to see that kind of a wilting effect because of those residual salts in the soil. So on our evergreens, I really like this photo as an example. This is where the snow was covering the bottom half of our tree here. And then the top half, as you can see, it's all brown. The browning starts from the tip of those needles and goes all the way. It's eventually going to work its way down and kill it completely. So we had some protection with that snow, but that top, you can see that injury on the top there. All right, moving on to how do we prevent this? There's several different methods to look at preventing damage. Again, I want to stress, we can replace the tree, we can't replace you. So if you need to, need to salt, go ahead and do so. But if you do know that you're going to be planting in an area that's going to have lots of applications, we do have some plant tolerant species, which we'll talk about in the next slide. We can also plant on berms or mounted raised beds. So this is going to get those roots up out of that soil, and it's going to help with the runoff issue. If it's a low-lying area, it's going to bring that soil up so we don't have issues with that water runoff and collection with that salts. We can also use physical barriers. So maybe a fence, plastic, or burlap can help kind of shield those trees. And when we're out shoveling snow, like I was this weekend, just kind of be aware of where you're putting that snow in the salt treated snow. Make sure you're putting in a different area that's not in that plant root zone. And before spring and before bud break, make sure to rinse off those plants and water them really, really heavy to kind of flush all those excess salts out of the root zone and off the leaves. And if we do run into issues, if we do have a soil analysis, we can apply gypsum or CSA SO4 to those heavy clay soils. This is going to help with those sodium ions and those calcium ions again, but that's going to be at the recommendation of your soil test. And looking at the sensitive plants, if you do really want a sensitive plant in that application area, plant it as far away as you can. All right, so this list, this next slide is some of the salt tolerant varieties for Missouri. So I have some trees and shrubs and evergreens. I'm not going to read them all to you, but Missouri Botanical Garden has a really great list on all these different tree species and shrubs available for you. So that's all I have, and happy shoveling and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Traven. And so I mentioned in the beginning that the wizard behind all the scenes is Jared. And I'll tell you what, He was chatting with me privately, and he said that he can get rid of those black bars that we've been seeing on Traven's presentation. So if you guys will come back and go to our YouTube channel, and I'll drop that in the chat box here in just a minute or two, then you can see the full presentation without those black bars. So Traven, don't worry about it. We can talk about it later. It's just a little glitch on your computer itself. So what I would like to do next is to talk about starting a seed germination system. And Donna's going to do that presentation for us. Donna.
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find it. Have too many windows open. Okay, here we go. Okay, so today I was going to talk about getting ready for our seed starting season. So I get a lot of the questions of how do you start your seeds? Where do you start your seeds? What do you use to start your seeds? Well, I'm just going to tell you today about basically how to set up a seed starting rack so you can get going. Because I know we're all getting those seed catalogs. We're all getting excited. I know I've placed several orders, and I'm just really wanting to get going. Some really cool varieties this year are out. So anyhow, so we're going to get ready for starting seeds. What is one of the first things you need is some type of rack or some type of support, a sturdy surface. So, I'm not telling you can't do it on your kitchen table, because you can. I did it for many years. But what I like is to get a heavier, sturdier stand that I can actually hang little chains from and hang my lights. So it can be a wire rack, a baker's rack, sawhorses, pallets, tables, anything you want. But the big thing is that it has to be solid, and it has to be able to hold the weight of the trays if you're going to have much soil on them. Okay, so then we need to also take a look at lights. Now, I will tell you, for years and years, I have always leaned on the fluorescents, because you can still get a pretty cheap or even a used ballast, a shop light that is pretty economical, and then you can get new bulbs to go in it. I will tell you that as long as you start out with new fluorescent bulbs, they will be just fine for seed starting. You do not have to graduate to LEDs. Now, I will tell you that I have invested in the LEDs. I'm having to relearn how to grow, because those lights grow very differently than a fluorescent bulb. And so instead of having a fluorescent only 2 inches away from my seedlings, I've had to really learn a hard lesson that they have to be more like 10 inches away from my seedlings. And so it definitely, I would do your homework and find out what kind of lights you want to use. There's pros and cons to both. Lots of different shapes, sizes, different configurations of lights. You have light strips, like is in the top right hand picture. And then there are actual squares that will actually light a 2-foot square. And so just lots of different configurations. I really do advise suspending lights, and that way you can raise them up or lower them, and be able to adjust them. Because like I said, if you're using a fluorescent light, it's going to be like that bottom picture, where they're going to be down really close to the seedlings, because you want as much light to get to it. But if you're going to be using LEDs, then you're going to be pulled up away from that light, because the lights are a lot stronger. So lights are running, especially when we're talking about LEDs, you can get a 2-foot by 2-foot coverage, or even a 2 by 4 foot coverage, depending on the dimensions of the light, for about $100. But if you're looking at lighting 3 or 4 shelves, that can really mount up on price. But if it's only 1 shelf for 1 light, then it's not so bad on that price. You can have a simple light stand. This is from University of Maryland Extension. All it is using PVC pipe to create a light stand, and then you can use string or chain to suspend that light. Pretty easy, economical, and easy to build. Definitely take a look at that, because if you're wanting to start up and you haven't had something before, this is a good way to go if you don't want to use shelves. The other thing I want to address is bottom heat. You don't need bottom heat for everything, but some things it's a bonus. For example, peppers that you don't have bottom heat on, it's going to take you more than 21 days to get those little guys up out of the ground. But if you have bottom heat, you can get them up between 7 and 14 days. So if you're really looking at the time and you're running behind, heat mats do make a difference. Tomatoes will be up in 5 to 7 days. But as far as things like cole crops, the broccoli, the cabbage, the cauliflower, you do not need any warmth underneath because they're a cool season crop and they'll come up regardless. Now, if you're doing a lot of flowers, I would suggest probably the heat mat. You can also invest in heat cables, but that is being placed under soil or under a barrier between the seeds and the trays. Just keep that in mind. I really like the heat mats. They're going to run you anywhere between $40 to $100, depending on the size that you want. I do know I have a lot of master gardeners that will tell me I don't use heat mats. I actually put them on top of the refrigerator. And the thought behind that is your refrigerator puts out a lot of heat off the top, and that it's enough to germinate seedlings. So, I've always thought of what it would look like to have the seed trays on top of the refrigerator and a light system. So I've always chuckled. But I like my way the best, but everybody's different, and whatever works for you is, I always tell people keep doing it that way. I will tell you, if you're on a budget crunch, heat mat might not be what you need because they do run pretty pricey. You need waterproof trays. And this way you don't have water going everywhere. I like to get trays without holes. They are a little pricier, but they do make it nice to where it catches all that moisture. I have now invested in the bigger trays to fit on my shelf. That is the middle tray. And so it is 36 inches wide and about 24 inches deep. And so they make it nice to where you can flood those trays and allow those plants to take up that water. Makes it real nice. You can also get boot trays that you can get from department stores. I believe the one in the picture, I believe I bought it from IKEA, but it will actually hold one of those 10-20 trays without holes. You can come up with all sorts of different things to keep the mess at bay. And I also have been investing in washer pans or hot water heater pans that you put under that to catch any leaks that might happen. So you can do a number of different things to keep any water leaks from happening, but they also are great when you need to be watering and you need to hold that water for a certain amount of time while those little seedlings suck it up from the bottom of the container. You can water over the top, but you don't necessarily need to. So putting it all together, you need some type of support for the trays, the light, something to hold the light, and then heat mats, and then a way to water. That is pretty much get you started. And the big thing is start early, start now putting it together. Start small. If it's not something you're going to do a lot of, just test it out. Trial and error is always a good thing. And then start simple. Don't invest too much. This is not something that you need to spend $1,000 on. Just $100. That should be your target. And make sure to sanitize anything you're using. A 10% bleach solution is what we recommend. And there are other non-bleach alternatives out there like Physan and Green Shield that work just fine. And then maybe hopefully you'll have a fun time starting seeds once you have your seed starting system set up. Okay, back to you.
Thank you, Donna. You always have such fantastic information, and all of your pictures and a lot of the work that you do is from your own personal experience. I've been to your place and it's just phenomenal. So thank you always for sharing with us. Next, what we're going to do is keep along in that same line of propagating and making new plants. And so Kelly is going to come and visit with us about propagating houseplants as gifts, even though the holidays are over, but we still have gifts that we can give in the future.
Yes,
Thanks, Kelly.
you bet. Let me get this pulled up here. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, looks great. Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I know Christmas is over, the holidays are over, but I wanted to show an idea that I did this past Christmas. And I set up a little sharing station in my house, and this is what it looked like. It wasn't anything fancy. But these were just a couple of plants that I had to give a really good haircut to before I brought in for the winter. And so what I did is when I gave those plants haircuts, I took cuttings and I put them in water. And then when people came over, during the holidays, I could send them home with a little propagation, and they really liked that. I would not use these two types of plants again, but you kind of get the idea of what can be done. Okay, so why water propagate? Well, whenever you propagate a plant in water, you're taking cuttings of the parent plant. So it is a clone of the parent plant. So it's an exact copy of that original plant. And if you're wanting to share something like a family heirloom with family members, this is a great way to do it and a pretty foolproof way to do it as well. This can be a really budget-friendly way to help people get started that might want to get into houseplants. It's educational, it's a great project to do with kids, and it's pretty easy to do as well. So basically what you want to do is you want to get some kind of a clean jar or a vase or any kind of a vessel that will hold water. And so if you go to thrift stores or garage sales, it's a great place to pick up little propagation vessels, all kinds of cute things for very low price. Or if you just have a lot of glass jars that you want to get rid of, or seasonal vessels that hold water, any of those can be used. And if they're pretty large, you can use floral tape, like you can see here in the picture, to kind of hold those plants up in that glass jar. And so probably one of the main things that you want to keep in mind is that when we're propagating plants, we want to propagate healthy plants. So make sure the plant is healthy, it is vigorous, it's growing well. And if you do that, you're going to have better success with getting those cuttings to root and make new plants. You want to use a sharp knife or garden pruners. Make sure that you keep those sterilized between plants as well. And you just want to make a cut below a leaf node. Most cuttings are going to be between 4 and 6 inches long. And you want about 2 inches or so below the water line. And one important thing to keep in mind is that you don't want any foliage below that water line, because that can lead to rot and other problems. And then basically stick it down in the water, put it in bright, indirect light, change out the water as needed. Some water propagations, you may have to change out the water, every few days because it clouds up, it looks bad. Others you may not have to. But top off the water when the roots are exposed to air. You can add a very weak fertilizer solution. Keep in mind that these little water vessels are very small, so it's easy to over fertilize. So just a tiny amount of fertilizer can be used. And then as far as the length of the time that you leave it in the water, that can vary with plant species. Some cuttings can live in there indefinitely, and some will only live in water for a short amount of time. So this is kind of fun to experiment with, and with those different lengths in water and how long you can keep something growing in water. With the case of pothos, they can stay in there for a very long amount of time, sometimes several years. Once the root system reaches about an inch in length, that is when you can transfer to soil. Do keep in mind, though, when they go from water to soil, those roots have been spoiled. They have had a constant water supply for a long period of time. That's what they're used to. And if you transfer it to a pot of soil and then let that soil dry out, it can kill that plant very quickly. So just keep that in mind. And then once they get into soil and you keep them watered, you can gradually kind of decrease the water amount a little bit to just kind of harden them off and help them to get acclimated to being in soil. And there's lots of different types of plants. If you have a favorite plant, put it in the chat for someone else to try, but pothos, philodendron, herbs, you can even take cuttings of summer annuals. And here's a couple that I tried at the end of this last summer. This was a coleus. It was kind of a lime green and pink coleus that I rooted in water and then transferred to soil. And then the one in water is a sweet potato vine. It rooted very well and has done pretty well for several months now. And don't be afraid to experiment and fail. So that same sweet potato vine, I also cut some of the tubers from it and tried to grow those out. And it looks like something I need to send to the diagnostic lab. So don't be afraid to fail. That's what growing plants is all about. And if this is something that you're interested in, maybe we can talk about other ways to propagate houseplants in the future on some other garden hours. And because it's a fun way to get more plants, and there's lots of different ways to do it.
Thank you, Kelly. And there are lots of ways of propagating our plants. And I also like to take cuttings and start growing them in water. I have a tendency to let them stay too long in water and not get them planted. So that's something that I'm going to be working on this year as I propagate a bunch of my plants. So we've come more or less to the end of the hour. Jennifer was going to do a presentation for us, but hopefully she'll be able to come back to us next month. So what I'd like to go ahead and do is, first of all, there was a question in the chat box. If any of you might have missed it, it was a question about stratification of seeds, and Donna answered that in the chat box along with the publication. And so we would, if you're interested, go ahead and grab that link. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is go ahead and close this down. And so, as always, we're happy to be here and to share our information with you. Here is a map. You'll notice that Patrick Byers is officially retired with us now. So his position down in the south central portion of the state is now open. We have heard that there was a hire for this section in the very far southwest. Hopefully we'll know who that is soon for the rest of us internally, and then we'll be more than happy to share that with you as time moves along. We do know that there were some interviews in this particular area, and so hopefully we'll hear some news about that, and we can share that in the February garden hour. So we'll just see how that plays out as we move forward. Feel free to reach out to any of us. We're always happy to answer your questions for you. So if you're interested and would like to go back and look at something, hear it again, all of our garden hours are live streamed, and we also, so you can watch them not necessarily through Zoom, but through our YouTube channel. And so if you've missed something today or would like to go back, go check out the youtube.com MUIPM, and this is where all of our recordings are going to be. And Jared's going to clean up Travin's with the black bars there. So come back next week, give him a little bit of time. He's on daddy duty this week, from what I understand. So he may have dealing with a little bit more time with his toddlers than what he's accustomed to, but he'll get to it. So check back next week. We also want to let you know that we do try to drop in a lot of great information into the chat box. So you can save that chat box and those links. Just go to the chat box. You can click on those three dots. Those three dots will say save chat, and then you can save it however you might like to save that to your own computer. And then next month we'll be here on February 19th from noon to 1. We hope that you'll be able to join us. And then one last, here it is again, the slide. I'll leave it up there for a minute or two. But in the meantime, as we've all heard from Zack, it's going to be pretty cold and a little warm up here for a couple days, then it's going to get really cold again. So everybody stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you in February. Thank you for joining us.